Hello and welcome to the Tinto Recap, where I look at all of the things that Tinto Talks has been talking about, and then I talk about them. So we will start off with the Friday post on the Tinto Maps, where we had a look at Carpathia and the Balkans, and surprisingly, this did not result in as nearly as much controversy and angst and anger and fighting and such as anyone was expecting, really, which is rather nice. But we have some really interesting comments, so let us get into those, and I'll start off with this one here. Pavia, I still don't know how to pronounce your name, I'm sorry. Basically going over what the workflow kind of is, like the way that they work when it comes to making the maps. Each week they post a Tinto Maps dev diary for a region. They ask the community to post the feedback on the dev diaries. It's the easiest way for them to look at it, to reply to it and gather it in an organised way. Sometime after, usually some weeks, they put each Tinto Maps region into the development pipeline again and make the review of it. When they think all the feedback has been gathered, analysed, implemented, they share the review with the community. That is the feedback that we've gotten now for France and the Netherlands. Show the results of their feedback and also have an extra feedback and sanity pass. Given this workflow, what's useful is posts in the Tinto Maps dev diary with detailed feedback, if possible, supported by sources. So making new threads, while it will be seen, it is best to put it in the thread of the map. So for example, if you next week they're going to be looking at a map of Syria and the Levant, if somebody then sees an error and they make a completely new thread about Syria and the Levant, they're probably going to get asked to put it in the Tinto map thread, or it will simply be merged there against their will. That's just the best thing that they have available to them right now. Links to specific posts in other open threads by the community were the results of maybe months of weeks of discussion. Yeah, if you've had a thread about Syria and the Levant for a while now, linking to it in that thread is a pretty good idea. It's actually something that we're going to have a look at here, because there has been a Hungary thread for quite some time that Tinto, I know, have been paying pretty close attention to. What's not useful? Threads outside Tinto Maps that are not linked in the Tinto Maps. Maybe reading them, but it's way easier if you link here with the results of the discussion, so they can review the feedback way more faster in an organized way. I will point out that just makes sense. If you want to read feedback in a localized way, you want to put it all in the same place. You concentrate it all into one thread, so you don't have 1,000 tabs open trying to pinpoint all of the good feedback. It's not a useful thing. Repeating the same post several times in the same dev diary, and then you're making noise that is more difficult to gather the feedback. Complaints about previous Paradox projects. It's project season. We're quite clear on what we're asking from the community for it and the results that they're given in return. So yeah, X Game did this region wrong, and complaining about that is not useful in a Tinto thread. Just yeah. 3 more things. The maps will never be perfect and will always have errors. However, they want to make them the best possible, as this is why they are taking so seriously the community feedback on the project. Let's put it this way. They have several Spanish content designers in the team, as Paradox Tinto is based in Sitges in Spain, who care a lot about the region, and they still have several errors to correct on the Iberian map that they could tackle thanks to the community. Second is about the care or carelessness about specific regions. They try to put the same care on each one, although sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder. But at the end of the day, they want a consistent result in all of them. They will devote to all of them the time that they need to in due time, because, for example, the Polish, Baltic, Ruthenian Tinto Maps, they have 52 pages with over 1,000 posts to review, so they'll continue following their working schedule in order to make this possible. I would like to check how many comments. This is post 559 of this Tinto thread, but I'm just going to quickly have a look at how many we have total. If we jump to the final page, which would be at the bottom of this part, 38 pages, and how many comments? Currently, we're sitting at 746 in this Tinto thread. Fair enough. But 1,000 on the Polish one is very, very high for sure. Finally, they don't have anything against Romanians or any other peoples or cultures. Yeah, the whole area was named Wallachian, so there was a little bit of an outcry from some Romanian people, apparently. Um, it is what it is, you know. I don't think anyone at Paradox has a hate boner on them for any specific culture. That's a bit silly. I know me saying that is a little bit. Uh, Someone's gonna have a problem with that based on a previous video, but hey, deal with it. They do care about all of them at the same level. They have a Romanian culture in group. How that works will be explained in a future Tinto talk. So culture groups are a thing, okay. That includes Wallachian, Transylvanian, Aromanian, Istro-Romanian, a culture that they didn't mention in the dev diary but is present in 3 locations: Buzet, Pazin, and Rovini. And potentially Moldavian if created by events. They just mentioned a couple of posts above. So I think there's quite a decent representation of the culture. A lot of people have also been asking for Vlachs, which is something that the Romans, there's a word the Romans used to describe the, I guess, Wallachian people. But I think that is just a case of Wallachian being translated into Romaica, which was what Greek was called back then. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a really. I think it's interesting that Pavia had to put this out there, right? I love seeing, an explanation of the workflow. I just think it's very interesting that this had to be said. I feel like there is maybe, it's not a lot, but there is certainly some angst towards cultural representation. And I know myself, when we looked at the British map, I said I disagree with this. I think there should be a Northern English, Southern English. Here's my reasoning and such. But there wasn't any animosity there. Whereas, I don't know, I feel like there's in certain regions of the world, culture is a little bit more of a thing to get animositied about. I don't know. It's just yeah. We all expected there to be a little bit of angst about this dev diary, and there was a little bit. Let's be honest. Anyway, moving on. This is one of the posts that I was referring to. Kid Mudena here asking where is Transylvania, because they have, of course, made a big old post about Transylvania. Should be a vassal of Hungary. They don't have them on the map. Hope we'll get attention. Basically making a thread and linking it. Basically giving their sources. I mean, this is Wikipedia, but Wikipedia has a link of sources, so I kind of feel like it's fine. But basically going into detail about why they think Transylvania should exist, which I think is entirely fair enough. And Pavi saying they've been reading the thread. Transylvania is a tag that can revolt or spawn from Hungary, as it happened historically in the 16th century, when it was released as a subject by the Ottomans. However, we don't think it fits for the situation in 1337, as King Charles I Robert made a clear effort to rein in the different voivodes and make them into appointed officers, not hereditary ones. Thus, we want to portray a more centralized kingdom of Hungary because of that. Again, man made his case. Pavia making, a reason why they're going to decline. I think that's fine. It's very interesting. Were Bosnians really separate from Serbians or Croats at this point in time? I called it. I called it. And let's have a look. We said that there was going to be. I said personally that I thought there was going to be somebody questioning the existence of the Bosnian culture. I didn't say that because I think they didn't exist or I think they did exist. I don't know. I am ignorant of that topic. The existence of a culture in 1337 in the Balkans is not my area of expertise or interest. So I don't know. I am ignorant. And, ignorant is not a bad thing, as long as you recognize it and don't pretend that you know shit. But I called it because I have heard people say this before. And let's have a look at how fast it was. Post 11. Post 11. Bearing in mind the previous 10 posts, one of them was the dev diary itself. One is a response to a reasonable question about are the Kasangos present. I don't know who they are. Saying, lovely map. This one that we've seen. Basically a joke. another joke. There's the question. And then anchor post. A lot of people don't like this, anchor posting. I'm going to respond to a thread with a nothing post so that I can edit it later with my sources. This isn't liked. People don't like when you do this. And there was another one later on by Ludi, I think, which went equally downvoted. And then, jokes and jokes. So, it took very few real posts before we had that kind of thing. But anyway, were Bosnians really separate from Serbians or Croats? There was a strong Bosnian identity in the late Middle Ages, with a Banat that became a kingdom, a church, and a dialect of their own. That is their justification for including it. Again, I am ignorant, one way or the other. I have got comments on my own video from Friday, basically arguing both points. I do not know which one is correct. I am inclined to trust Paradox on this one. That's just the way it is. But anyway, will Romani pops exist? Past Paradox games have lacked any representation of them, despite it making sense. By the game's start date, they were already present in Europe. So Romani are like traveling people. They're present in pretty much every country in Europe right now. You can Google it. It's a touchy topic. So I'm not going to try and explain more in case I put my foot in my mouth. But they don't have the proper tools to portray them correctly. I think maybe we could have them, but there are a couple of things that they'd want to have first, and they're not entirely sure if they'll get them. So, if you've played Anpana, there is a pretty long event chain that most countries get called migration of the Cardesti. The Cardesti are not a culture group on the map, but it's just various events where you get things happening with these Cardesti, the locals not trusting them, how you as the ruler of your country manage that. You get some bonuses, you get some negatives, but the Cardesti definitely seem to be very much based on the Romani people. So at the very least, you probably could have Romani in EU5 and have it work through events, where you get events relating to this group of people, this foreign culture migrating through your lands. It would be... I think the issue here, though, is the couple of things they'd like to have first is because of pops, right? You can't really have just an event system about migrating people when you look at the pops and that doesn't happen. The things they need to have would be a system whereby a single culture could migrate all at once, moving from province to province or location to location. I think that is the thing that they would want, the thing that they would need. Maybe that will be the case later on. But, events would be nice as well. I don't know. Here, asking about changing the names of various cultures. So at the moment they have Carpathian Germans, they have Baltic Germans and Silesian Germans, and none of those kind of feel right. So they're looking for new names. For Carpathian Germans, they would suggest Zipser, which is a decent enough name, I think, for a culture. Pavi responding here, if you're able to get better names for Baltic and Silesian Germans, they might have a deal and change it to Zipsa. Here, again, saying that the Transylvanian German name is not great, could use a better name. They aren't completely happy with the concept either, as they have 4 different cultures for Germans of the East: Baltic, Silesian, Carpathian, and Transylvanian Germans. But they think it's the least bad solution to portray the cultural melting pot that these places were for the different German settlers. If you've got any names for these, obviously Zipser could be one of them for the Carpathian Germans. If there is another name for Transylvanian, Baltic, and Silesian Germans, then, write it in the thread, and maybe those names will be changed. What's the naming convention? Because location names are all over the place. I think the British Isles, Tinto talks, it said that the locations will have the name of the primary culture currently ruling them. Does that also apply here? So the plan is to have different game rules for dynamic naming and different layers of dynamic names. I love this so much. I like that. Dynamic names are awesome. I do want them to be Latinized, as in using the Latin alphabet, because having endonyms, the names that people call themselves, is all well and good, but if you put it in Cyrillic or even worse in Chinese characters, it is literally illegible for somebody who doesn't speak those languages. So yeah, having it all in English at the very least, but then localized to their own naming convention, I think would probably work best, for me at least. So the locations in the Kingdom of Hungary could potentially have 3 or 4 different names to them, depending on the language, which is super interesting. Wonderful dev diary. The elephant in the room is obviously the Transylvanians. Why not make them Wallachian? So they think this makes for a better cultural divide, and yes, in this case, it would probably be better to have Moldavian differentiated over time. In any case, they're open to feedback and reviewing specific topics. I feel like this is just like ubiquitous across the board. This is everywhere. They are open to feedback just in general. They noticed the lack of wetland environment in the Tisa, the parts of the Danube and the Drava, and along the southern shore of Lake Balaton. The areas were marshy, swampy, and wetland environments for most of history until their drainage. We talked about drainage on Friday, and here it is again. They are aware, but it's a bit tricky. There's a group of people who are already in contact with Sulfur Aeron. This is just a person on the forums. This is not a dev. It's just a person on the forums that has made some absolutely phenomenal postings about topography and climate, mostly climate, and basically Paradox is in contact with the guy to portray the Hungarian wetlands in the best possible way, and also just other places as well. This guy's thread is very, very interesting. If you go and find it, and you should give it a read. I think Bulgaria's colour, along with the culture colours, should be changed to a darker grey or possibly even a green, as it looks much better in their opinion, fits with the other Paradox game. Noted, we don't want green as it may be too close to the Ottomans' colour, but it might do the trick, and we'll take a look. Also, the Greek culture colour looks very dull and way too similar to Turkish, which is especially important not to have considering the cultural mixing in border provinces. So they are suggesting light blue or light purple. They think light blue is a good suggestion. I disagree. I disagree because these people are not Greek. They do not refer to themselves as Greek. These are Romaioi. That is, the culture name is Romaioi. They speak Romaica. This is not a Greek empire. It is a Roman empire. And so I would personally be of the opinion that Greek should be changed to Romaioi, and the language, because language is a part of the game, should be changed to Romaica. The Greek national revival happened much, much later. I think in the 1700s, I want to say. After, centuries of being dominated and oppressed by the Ottomans, there was a nationalist uprising and a national awakening, let's say, of Greek culture. But before that, they weren't Greek. They didn't refer to themselves as Greek. They were Romaioi. They were Romans. And I think, having that culture be named Romaioi and having that culture color be a purple would be the most accurate. It would certainly be more accurate than calling it Greek. And I'm aware that I'm pretty sure that Johan disagrees with me on this one. I have had discussions with him about renaming Byzantines to Romans in both EU4 and EU5. Yeah, he disagrees, but I disagree with him. So this is my flag. It is in the sand. It is my hill. I will die on it. Feel free to come help me. But moving on. What are the intentions between for the default location name, so we know whether to correct inconsistencies or are they intended? The default will most likely be Wikipedia standard. That means either English or their current endonym. There may be some exceptions to this, of course, but they also want to have a game rule for a full English play. If some players prefer that to the cultural dynamic names, feel free to post inconsistencies and they'll try and have them incorporated. Fair enough. Will Red Ottoman Empire be a thing that starts in the game, or will they keep their green regardless? it will most likely stay as green. Will flags be changed to fit the country colours, like how the Venetian flag was changed to be blue? They're doing the flags for the game as historically as possible, so, it's going to be the Lion of St. Mark, I think, is the Venetian flag, on a red field instead of the blue field like it is in EU4. The flag artist is great. Good. I like that. I like good art. So excited to play the region, but they have some feedback about Moldavia. Is there a way to play as Moldavia from game start? Not right now. Starting as the Golden Horde and releasing and playing as Moldavia or via an event. I don't think they've talked about releasing and playing as yet, but either way. But anyway, I think the design of the elements for the creation of the voivodeship of Moldavia will be a dynamic historical event that fires for Hungary after some triggers, creating it as a type of subject, probably a march, with one of the options allowing the player to switch and play with it. Ideally, they would have some follow-up events allowing the country to break free from Hungary. Also after getting some triggers. There's a feeling of progression in the gameplay, starting from scratch, becoming independent from Hungary, question mark, profit, naturally. And then they have some feedback for the cultures as well. I think people have said everything. I have to say, yeah, people have be having lots of things to say about culture in this region. But they think it should either be a single Romanian culture, they strongly prefer it, or a separate Moldavian culture. At the very least, rename Wallachian to Vlach. This is what I was talking about previously. But yeah, he had a really long post. The sources, I like sources. Everyone likes sources. He cited them. Regarding cultures, Pavia doesn't think it makes much sense to have Moldavian as a division from the start, as the polity wouldn't exist yet. However, I find it very reasonable to have it created after one of these events to portray the differentiated regional identity of the Romanian-speaking people. Also, thanks for the feedback. Again, love, I love feedback, especially when it's well sourced, and it's really nice to see Paradox responding to that and thanking people for offering the feedback. For sure, it is very nice to see. Finally, just by the by, it's the Tinto Maps with the fewest negative reactions, and the feedback so far is great, even if the community was expecting some volcanic mayhem. Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. Everyone was expecting it to be the most explosive. But going back to the post, let's have a look. We had... Alright, I feel like this must have been doctored. Because there was a guy going through and disliking every single comment. I feel like they've been removed, though. There was a person going through disliking every single comment on this thread, and most of those have been removed now. So I don't know. I feel like that's probably not what happened. Though I could see it being one person being disliking all the comments and then being so angry that they got suspended or banned, and then all those dislikes went away. That could certainly be it. But anyway, that is the Tinto Maps post. Let us move on. We're talking on Wednesday about institutions and ages. So we have this thread right here. When I have different ages for different regions, Met's saying. I'm pretty sure Metz is one of the Mayo and Taxes developers. I'm almost certain of that. But basically saying they think their game might be a little bit too Eurocentric with these ages, so would it be reasonable to have different ages for different regions? I'm not going to read all of the post out, but we can show into depth responses and see Johan saying, ages being global is one thing that is not being changed. Having more than 3 institutions per age, though, is definitely a possibility. I'm fine with this. I think ages should be global. If you are a country that expands to have multiple parts of the world, what age are you in as the Netherlands if you own both the Netherlands and Indonesia? Kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be in 2 different ages at the same time for one country, in my opinion. So more institutions per age, though, I could definitely see that being pretty nice. But anyway, is the number of institutions per age fixable with modding? Yes, it is. So, if for example, if Anbana wants to add extra ages extra institutions, they can totally do that. The institution of artificery, for example, could be added alongside, keeping what EU5 already has. There was actually a really good thread on the subreddit as well, talking about what potential institutions Anbana could have, which is pretty cool. Moving on here, though. How do ages and institutions impact the New World, especially compared to EU4? Could they perhaps have their own ages and institutions early on when they're not in contact with the Old World? So they won't care about them until maybe the Age of Discovery. So what we're seeing here is potentially confirmation that there is not going to be a situation where you as a New World nation are struggling to tech up because you have not embraced the Renaissance that you don't know about yet. Not caring about institutions until the Age of Discovery. I mean, we'll learn more about how technology works in next Wednesday's Tinto talks. So I'm looking forward to seeing how exactly that works, but it's fun to speculate about for sure. Regarding the Tinto talk, it seems an institution can only spawn in a single location. Furthermore, if there are multiple locations that fulfill the requirements for an institution to spawn, how will the spawn point be determined? It's random of all eligible and weighted by population. I read this comment out because he answers this in another one that we will be looking at. I thought that was this one. My bad. Moving on. What happens if historical spawning is on? An historical origin location for an institution does not meet the requirements to spawn the institution. It will always spawn. It's something that I questioned in my my thread, or not my thread, in my video. But yeah, if you completely sack Sevilla, so it doesn't meet the requirements for spawning. I think it was New World, the Institution for Colony. But if historical is on, then it will always spawn there regardless. Again, it's not an option that I think I'm going to use very often. I quite like dynamic. I think that works the best. So let me know what you guys think, though. Which version are you going to use? Historical, dynamic, or random, or whatever? So the New World does not get those institutions until colonizers come to visit them, like in EU4. Yes, but they also don't have a need for them. I'm very curious as to seeing what institutions bring and why they are needed or not needed. I had this question for the longest time. Big fan of CK2 and 3. Will a super secret mystery project be able to convert CK3 saves? Like a certain other Paradox title. They have no official plans on making a converter, but Johan is a big fan of it. Johan likes the converter, so he definitely wants to do it in the future, which is a little bit against the grain of current Paradox policy right now, as far as I know, because the converters are a massive time sink, a massive amount of effort, and I thought that the policy, official or unofficial, was to leave it to modders to make converters. If they do end up making one, though, that would be certainly very interesting, for sure. What sort of levers is the player able to pull to actively engage with the spread of institutions? So for Third Ages, it's primarily trade, but later on they can use a cabinet action. No clicking buttons on a province to develop it to 35, 39, purely to get a institution. Fantastic. I hate development in that way. And it was kind of just ahistorical. So I'm quite happy to see a more realistic spread of institutions, for sure. Can institutions spawn in multiple places, or is it limited to one? This is what I thought I was answering earlier. Could Japan and Europe independently spawn pike and shot? It's limited to one at the moment. Very important ATM here. We could, in theory, add a game rule that allows multiple spawns, maybe one per subcontinent. I think this is a fantastic idea. Because one of the things that was mentioned, and I'm sure we'll see a comment on it in a moment, was the institution of the military. Hold up, I need to bloody find it because I'm blanking on what it was called. Military revolution. The institution of military revolution is spawns in Sweden, and there was a lot of commentary over why Sweden. But if it could spawn in Sweden and in the Low Countries, which was the controversy and who it should have been, according to some people, then that would totally work fine as well. But yeah, we'll get to that comment when we see it. But yeah, multiple spawns I think is a decent idea. About confessionalism, this is something that I commented on. It feels a little bit too directed. Seems very specifically Christian. What would that institution spreading onto a non-Christian province even represent? It's true that the rise of confessionalism was mostly felt in Christianity. It could be argued, though, that other societies and religions also experimented important changes more or less at the same time. Think about the religious changes in Persia from a Sunni majority into a Shia majority, all the religious processes that took place in India, including the birth, I guess, of Sikhism, and the religious reforms of the different Mughal emperors, or the religious fights in East Asia, for which the religious situation in Japan, the final stage of the Sengoku Jidai, is probably most important. So yeah, I still feel like I don't think anyone really had a problem with what it represented and what it was doing. I think people just mostly didn't like the name. There's been a lot of like discussion about what names make sense, like we heard earlier about Age of Renaissance. People didn't like that. The institution of confessionalism seems like another one where the name is just a little bit too specific to be an institution that is supposed to spread across the world. So definitely I could see this being changed, though there are arguments about, changing it to religious reform is a little bit too generic. Why Stockholm for the military revolution? When I got my military history degree a decade ago, we placed the start in the Netherlands. So Johan's saying here, and this is what I was talking about multiple spawn locations. You can credit either Maurice of Nassau or Gustavus Adolphus. Okay, 50-50. So why did Paradox choose Gustavus Adolphus? Because Johan is Swedish. I mean, at least the man owns his biases. One tactic currently is to yoink colonialism by being a Chinese colonizer of some such. Is there a reason to change this to require West Europe, Africa in its current state? So they want the game to have default options be more or less historical. So therefore, that's why the demands for creating colonialization, which I will just again go and check the requirements for it. Legalism, meritocracy, feudalism, there's Renaissance. Here we are, the Age of Discovery. Spawned at any point in Western Europe or North Africa with more than 2,000 burghers. Discovered the Azores and the West African coastline. So basically, the guy's wondering why we have a situation where you need to be here for the dynamic spawning. Basically, they didn't like it where people could spawn the institution in China, I guess is the long and short of it. And they wanted to be a little bit more historical. Fair enough. Decent enough reason, I think. Ringe wanted to ask if Project Caesar is going to be low-end PC friendly. Is it going to be optimized? I mean, this part, fine. This part, kind of a silly question. Like, no, Abdul, we are intentionally going to make the game run like complete garbage. On your PC specifically. Optimization? Pff, ain't no way. But yeah, it will be greatly optimized. I mean, that's kind of... what developer would ever say anything else? Real, though. But not sure a low-end PC will cut it. I'd not try it on anything with less than 16 gigs of RAM. I currently have 16 gigs of RAM. I will be upgrading to at least 32 for this game. It also just helped my PC in general, especially with like editing software. Drinks the RAM. I do need to upgrade. But yeah, if you are wanting to play this, you probably want to get 16 gigs of RAM. It's probably going to cost you maybe €100, something like that. The RAM prices have come down quite a bit since EU4 was launched, for sure. The number of textiles that Mughal India could produce in the 17th century was greater than what Europe could produce, which made India the dominant supplier of textiles to the global market. In my honest opinion, it makes sense for the proto-factories and manufactories to first spawn either in the Netherlands or in India. So the Indian textile production, especially that out of Bengal, was very impressive. However, production methods are not exactly what they're portraying as manufactories, with greater emphasis on intensive production factors. Nonetheless, converting India into the textile factory of the world is perfectly possible in the game without accounting for the institution. If investing enough population and money into the matter, and spoiler, there's plenty of population in India. Goddamn, I was not aware. Yeah, I feel like manufactories as an institution is more about like how much cloth you could produce per person. So while yes, the Mughals were able to produce more cloth, more textiles than Europe, it was using more people to create those textiles by virtue of having such a much larger population. Europe, and with the advent of manufactories, was basically using fewer people to create more goods. So I think it makes sense to have manufactories specifically be somewhere that spawns in a place where the Industrial Revolution kind of started. Sevilla would probably make more sense as a historical location for the global trade institution, even if it's because of the monopoly of the Casa del Contratación. Pavia saying they don't think so. Spanish-sponsored expedition was the first to arrive in the New World, while Portuguese had already linked their outposts in Brazil, Africa, India, and East Asia way before the Spanish started their calling in the Philippines, its annual trading connection with Mexico. So at the moment, global trade spawns in Lisbon, and yeah, this is the reason why. Makes sense to me. And I've got that comment there again. My bad. It should be default for some institutions. China invented the printing press, even that movable type, independently from Europe. The movable type was a thing, though, that's why printing press is an institution in Europe and not in China, even though they had a printing press. I don't think it's worth renaming printing press to movable type either, to be honest. Right, so that is the final comment that I really wanted to show off over here on the Tinto Talks Dev Diary from Wednesday. And at the very end of said Tinto Talks, if I do a whole bunch of scrolling again, we were told that next week we're talking about what has replaced technology and national ideas. The fact that these are together is interesting because they're not linked at all in EU4 unless you have, I don't know, tech cost reduction in your national ideas. But I wanted to bring up a thread. I want to bring up a thread because it's something I want to talk about. And it is this thread here by Lindigan. Basically, they are wondering why national ideas should exist. They are not a fan of them, and they would like to, see it changed or replaced. Also calling it controversial topic. Personally, I do not at all agree with this. I do not agree that national ideas is a controversial topic. I think their existence is genuinely very positively received. They are a great way of differentiating one nation from another, even if that differentiation is somewhat ahistorical. So, for example, if you form Prussia, you are getting some of the best national ideas in the game, very, very military focused. But you could have formed Prussia without going to war. You could have formed Prussia and not used it in a militaristic way whatsoever. But your national ideas are saying that you're better at fighting just because you're Prussia. I understand that element of it. However, I don't think there is anyone really saying that national ideas should just be gone away with, or that national ideas are a bad thing for EU4, because that's ridiculous. They're just not. They are not the only differentiator between nations, but they are a really big one, and something that I personally look at every time I'm starting a new run. I will look at the national ideas, and if I see a really bad national idea set, I just won't play that nation. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's probably bad for the nation without good ideas, but for a nation with good ideas, they are another reason for me to want to play that nation. How is it going to be changed or replaced? We don't know yet. But I don't I don't agree with Lindigan here. I don't think it limits player imagination about what the tag could be, and I don't think it is a good idea to remove them and make everything based purely on starting factors, your population, your societal values, your things that every country is able to emulate with enough time. I don't think that's good. I think that makes for a pretty bland game. I think that falls into the same pitfalls and traps that Victoria 3 did, where people were all raving about, oh my gosh, all the countries are going to be differentiated and played super differently based on their thingy groups. What are they called? Political groups or whatever, based on their population, based on their trade goods. And when the game came out, it was discovered that bar specifically two tags, that being Japan and the Ottomans, every country played the same. It was the difference between playing as two different countries was basically how soon can I reach the status of the more established country. And that was bad. It was bland. It was boring. Every country played the same. That was not well received. That part was certainly not well received. So I think national ideas, like I say, they're not the be all and end all. They're not the only way of differentiating countries, but they are a really good way of it. But anyway, Johan has responded to this post. The system replacing national ideas will give similar things, like Sweden getting +5 discipline, etc. So this new system that we're getting is going to have similar things to national ideas. And Sweden is probably going to get +5 discipline in their EU5 version of national ideas. It's a feature of EU4 that always pops up as one of the main reasons people love playing the game, which I completely agree with. Somehow some people have misinterpreted this as him saying that it is like the main reason. Not, I don't know, the idea of one of being misunderstood is very interesting. But hey, it's easier to fight against a straw man than, somebody who's actually fighting back, or, reality. But it's just one of those things that I think is a really good way of making a differentiation between countries, increasing flavor, and I don't see the problem with this. I actually made another post that was not counted as a dev post, so we'll go down to it. Bokor here saying, will Sweden get +5 discipline just because it's Sweden? If it does, that's a plain letdown. Curious how you reconcile that with a believable world pillar. And Johan responds at some point. Let me see if I can find that. Where is Johan? Might be easier if I go onto his page. But yeah, he responded to this with a comment here. Because it matches 100% with the believable world to have different countries be different. While I agree with the existence of national ideas, I think this is maybe a little bit of a bad argument. It's not really going to convince anyone. And Bokor is kind of right. What makes Swedish 5% more disciplined than Finns or Danes or Pomeranians? I mean, I guess. I just don't care that there is that differentiation. It's not really an abstraction of anything, and it is kind of not. Sweden is getting that 5% discipline because of something they do in like the 1700s rather than what they do in 1337. But depending on when you're able to actually unlock that national idea, like in EU4, sure, you have discipline way late in the Swedish traditions, but you're unlocking that later because it's later in the national ideas. So I kind of see that as fine, but I don't know. I would like him to have a better response here because I don't think he's really convincing anyone that doesn't already agree with him. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. This is the Tinto talks, respondy talks to the talks of everything. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I would like to know your thoughts on national ideas, though. I've had a discussion about it in my own Discord. I've read it on the forums, and I would like to also read about it in my comment section. So let me know what your thoughts are regarding them. Do you want them to exist in EU5? Do you want them to be identical to how they exist in EU5? What are your thoughts on how they could possibly be changed? I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave them down there. If you wouldn't mind also throwing me a subscription if you are not already subscribed, that helps me out. And you also stay informed on everything coming out of Paradox Tinto, which is, one of those win-win things. So, yeah, I will see you on Wednesday for National Ideas and Technology. I'm actually really excited about that one, by the way. I think it's going to be 100% a key element of the game. It's going to affect so much. So I think this is one of the dev diaries that is going to be pretty meaty when it comes to information. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.